So one of the things I wanted to talk about, we've been covering a lot of, historical and ancient information, which is our focus. But we do want to kind of look at some of the also philosophical and kind of scientific blended things that we post, because one of the things that I hope that people can do is start to think about deeper questions such as, is the universe intelligent? There's this shift out of the religious kind of structures as we advance and evolve, and we understand that, we have to expand our view of who we are in the world. And when science, to a large degree, at least in the past 4 decades, has tried to tell us those answers and tell us exactly what we're supposed to think of reality. And I believe that a lot of people see there being this giant chasm between science and religion. And so I want to read this quote and kind of others, and then there's an article we want to cover a little bit to just kind of explain that, when these ideas of physics and quantum realities were created, these guys that created this stuff, these guys didn't take God out of the question, or the idea of sentience or consciousness out of the question. They actually viewed their discoveries in light of this grounded sentience and this intelligence. And so Max Planck, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as a derivative from consciousness. Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature, and that is because in the last analysis, we ourselves are part of the nature, and therefore part of the mystery that we are trying to solve. Dave, what do you take from that?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it all goes back to the old adage, this just didn't happen. There's an intelligent, pathway, and there's a methodology to the universe that's sentient and intelligent. It's not random. Anyone who looks at it with an open mind will see that it's not random. And so everything that we see is the result of thought. Everything we see is the result of thinking. And everything we see is formed into physical matter and mass by thought and thinking. It could be a little too philosophical maybe, and you might say, well, the thought of building a home creates the home, because the home now exists. The consciousness and the thought of the home is why the home exists. We have to understand there's a difference there. This is a little more mystical. So I think people need to look at it with a little more of a mystical eye. The way I see it is to deny that things are assembling in an intelligent manner and destroying themselves in an intelligent manner, as all cycles are like in life. It's crazy. You just can't deny it. You can't say that it's just a chemical process. And I think that's what he was saying. I think he was trying to dodge around the subject, because back then when Max Planck was around, you had to be careful what you said. It wasn't Galileo time, but you had to be really careful. So I think he said it pretty much right on to where no one could really argue with it. And I agree fully.
Yeah. Well, my whole question, and when I think about, well, is the universe intelligent? Well, what physics has taught us, if anything, is that we are embedded in a very dynamic structure. This structure is so highly faceted and dimensional that it should expand your idea of what the nature of reality is, not reduce it to a materialistic sense. Because if you are intelligent, then everything that creates you, and you have to imagine all the layers and systems that are involved to live, to every cell and atomic structure, subatomic structure, and there's all of this like electromagnetic, photonic. We don't really, to be honest, understand how deep it goes and how far it goes, and that's what these guys realized as they started to study the nature of reality. They realized that my gosh, God is greater. This idea that we call God is not what we think it is. This thing is much more expansive than we can ever imagine. So I think that people that are science minded and people that are kind of like not maybe theistic, kind of don't, I think, understand the classical physics view of these guys as they were discovering these realities. And I think it's important to kind of look back. And so today I also wanted to kind of move in that direction because we posted recently on the page an article that is kind of in the current news about what certain scientists are finding about the nature of what consciousness might be and how it affects, the greater systems of reality that we call
reality.
Reality. Yeah. So just to tie this in to what's kind of being discovered today as we kind of look at how science is, I think they're coming around. Don't you, Dave? I think that lately there's this push towards science kind of looking more at what consciousness might be.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Agree.
What do you think is causing that?
Well,
why is science moving in that direction?
I think they're running out of solutions. I mean, they're having to formulate things and they're having to come up with ridiculous theories, and particle physics is becoming more ridiculous every day. I think they're really looking for sort of the missing link, and I think the missing link, they're all realizing they want to call it something that's very scientific and logical. But they're coming to the realization that there's something unexplainable there and something mystical about it, and that they're going to have to address it as a what I call a form of sentience. They're going to have to understand that the subjects and the things that they're studying are as intelligent as they are and created by the same process. And I think it's really going to be good for science, because I think they're going to stop dwelling on the gods and the deities and all the good deeds of past messiahs, and they're going to start understanding that all along they've been telling us that God is not this. God is this over here, and this over here is basically the expanse of the universe, the unexplainable size of everything, because when you're at the edge of the universe, what's beyond it? The mysticism of it, the unsuredness that humans have, to define anything or
you got to
lock it in is crazy.
You got to think that like, how do we know what these people thought about what God was? Like, just because someone wrote a Bible doesn't mean the guy that you're saying believes in God, that what his idea of God was.
I think a lot of the books that we read, the Bible, I think certain people got a hold of them and made them sound like they wanted them to sound, but they really didn't do anything but hide the information, and, they hid it from the people who really, the serfs and the laity who really didn't need it. They just needed the 10 Commandments, and we live by that. But the deeper part of it, I think, is what the scientists are awakening to now, is that, there's metaphorical meanings, there's allegory, there's actual physical reality in the Bible, and in all these books.
Well, there's subconscious, like there's psychology involved. There's dynamic psychology involved in the structure of myth and how it affects the human mind, the subconscious, and
exactly
in how the ego kind of brings that information in and projects it, and so again, this all boils down to the astrotheological kind of origin to all of this study that we've got into since we've been here on the planet. I mean, just look at that right there. That's the Cat's Eye Nebula. I mean, what is that? Awesome. Is that random?
But that's what we see. Look at that right now, and that's what we see when we film it with our particular spectral analysis. The telescopes we use. What else is there that we're not seeing? That's how light works. And it's just as the idea of a deity or a creator or a source is hard to understand for some people. When you look at something like this, you got to think, he's the ultimate artist, or she. It's just there's nothing that creates that right there that you see that isn't fully in control. And the plan is laid out.
But we can all we can all agree that that's powerful.
Right.
And
And that's light years. That's not just like 100 miles across. That's like 100
yeah,
light years across.
right. Yeah. So again, so the article is saying that a new scientific concept has recently come to light, which scientists are calling panpsychism. Panpsychism says that the universe could be
Okay.
capable of consciousness, which could change everything. For quite some time, scientists have been working to understand the universe, where it came from, and why we are here. However, they have often come up short until now. The scientist responsible for such a notion is Gregory Matloff, and his ideas are shocking to say the least. According to Matloff, a physicist at New York City College of Technology, in his recently published paper, humans could be like the rest of the universe in substance and in spirit. Futurism reported that a proto-consciousness field could extend throughout all space. Basically, in layman's terms, the entire cosmos could be self-aware. This idea is not new in the science field. I mean, people go, oh, that's crazy, this guy doesn't, he's talking about. Here's Edward Schrödinger, right? Nobel Prize winning Austrian physicist, developed the field of quantum theory. This guy is,
I think
this
he
is
was
where
a
all the
cat
back,
lover. Wasn't he a cat lover as well?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right, and he's got the Schrodinger's cat, but he's this guy. All physics today rests on the back of these people's discoveries.
Right.
And his
Right.
statement is that the total number of minds in the universe is one. In fact, consciousness is a singularity phasing within all beings. So, what we're reading here is not like, oh, this guy is coming up with some new idea. This was the theory of the guys that discovered physics to begin with, and created the kind of backbone and laws, and figured out the mechanics of it, and brought it this far.
So is it
So
a frequency for everybody, or is it one signal that everybody determines what it means differently? I mean, it you don't want to simplify it down to there's just one basis for life in this universe. You kind of want to make it more complex. I mean, is that necessary?
well, I mean, yeah, they're saying here that the only dominant theory that we have of consciousness says that it's associated with complexity,
Okay.
with a system's ability to act upon its own state and determine its own fate. Theory states that it could all go down to very simple systems. In principle, some purely physical systems that are not biological or organic may also be conscious.
So they're compromising
So
a little bit right there. Yeah, I
yeah,
think
they're
that's what it's
compromising.
going
Yeah,
to take, man, to get
yeah, right.
science and spirituality to come together.
We have a Tesla quote that I don't have at hand, but it's basically on crystals, and it's saying that crystals are very unique. We have to. I'm paraphrasing, but he's basically saying that they are nevertheless, sentient beings, or they are living beings, right? Living organisms. Like, so the idea that this rock is more like a tree or like a biological organism, in that sense, that this is kind of tying into this, that biological organic might be conscious, like this thing
I
could
think he's
have.
getting down to the level of the matter, though. When you talk about that, because sure, a quartz is a living thing, in some aspect relative to other living things. It forms from specific minerals through a process of liquid dripping or whatever it takes, or pressure or heat. And when you think of a tree, a seed germinates through heat and moisture and from the sun, and then it creates photosynthesis. And
Right.
it's really simple, to think
It
of
is,
the
but that's
two
my point. Is that
similarities. Yeah.
people definitely, when you say, is a rock alive, they say no. Is a tree alive? They say yes.
Yeah.
Right. And so what
the
Tesla's saying
difference?
is that no, that rock is alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is where I think people need to make that jump, because people always say, oh, well, if you believe that consciousness is everything, then that table right there is conscious.
What I would ask was, who built the table? And someone would say, well, the table isn't conscious. And I would say, well, who built the table? Well, Joe did. Joe, the engineer over there, he designed and built it. Well, how did Joe build the table? What did he use? What processes did he use? Did he use thought? Did he use logic? Did he use simplification of things that didn't need to be overly
Yeah.
complex, and bam, your table becomes conscious.
Is that it's all made of the same stuff, right? I mean, that's what quantum theory and physics is all about, is looking
Exactly.
at this hyperdimensional space that never ends, and we have never found the bottom to, and it never seems to get smaller and smaller. That's why we're building hadron colliders around the world, and we're smashing atoms to break them apart to try to find smaller objects and study the fabric of this seemingly infinite, scalable fractal reality. And so these guys are kind of like you said, they're like, hey, there's no way I can describe this besides this thing. This is a mind matrix of some sorts. This has to be
There's just new people
some
thinking
kind
now.
of.
There's new people, there's new minds. They're being educated in different ways than people were, decades ago. And, it's almost like we're just waiting for that stick to break, and then everything to come crashing down, and everyone to understand, and someone, waiting to find that one thing that's going to connect all this. Okay.
That if you can agree that a computer itself could never exist without an intelligence creating it. I mean, our laptop computer is just going to, be grown on the planet like flowers.
Well, no, we just designed those to do what we need done. But computers.
Well, my point is that we are more complex than computers in exponential levels.
100 times more complex. Yeah.
If you think that a computer could never be built unless an intelligent creature could build it, then it would follow that you cannot be constructed unless a intelligent force could construct you, because the fact is you are more complex exponentially than a computer is. I mean, the smartest AI that they've created is like the dumbest. I mean, dogs are smarter, dolphins are smarter.
Yeah.
Like they cannot get to these levels. It's not.
Yeah.
So, people need to expand their idea of
organic
what they are.
It's going to be the future. Quantum computing, organic computing. I'm not a computer expert by any means, but my idea has always been, if you can find an organic form, life form, a tree, anything, mycelium, and turn it into a computer, then you're going to make the next step. That's the quantum computing. That's great. Looking smaller, I think looking smaller is a dead end. Honestly, we need to just look at what's
it is, because you're never gonna find it.
No, it's going to be smaller next time. And so they're building a new collider now, of course. So
that's actually a good. Let's pause there, because I think that here's where some of the problem is. This is where we have, I think, a core issue that needs to be understood, is that humans tend to reflexively think in finite terms. Humans have to think in finite terms.